Welcome back to Monitors Unboxed. It's time to update our OLED monitor recommendation guide for the middle of 2026. There have been several new OLED releases throughout the year so far, and some pretty aggressive entrants into the budget category. So this is a substantial update that brings a range of new suggestions for people after an OLED display. As with previous best of videos, I tend to focus on monitors I've personally tested and have confirmed to be good. I don't like recommending things based on spec sheets, so for the monitors I talk about today, I've either fully reviewed them or they're a variant of something I've reviewed. You can find more testing data and full impressions of everything in the dedicated reviews and roundups on this channel. These recommendations are not paid. No one has bought their way into this list. Everything is based on the test data, reviews, and of course my opinion. If you're interested in purchasing one of the monitors I talk about, links to them are in the description, and you can also use those links to check current pricing. But before I get to my top picks, a quick word from today's sponsor, and no, it's not a monitor company. Today's video is brought to you by Ugreen and their brand new Nexode Pro 200 watt power bank. This is the most insane power bank I've ever used. 25,000 mAh capacity, enough to fully charge a laptop or multiple phones. 2 included USB-C cables. One is a 65cm retractable cable, the other is integrated into the carrying loop. Both can output up to 100 watts simultaneously for a total of 200 watts of power output, which is enough to charge a 15-inch MacBook Air M5 from 0 to 47% in just 30 minutes. In addition, there's a USB-C and USB-A port on the top, so you can actually charge up to 4 devices simultaneously, with the smart display giving you real-time information. Ugreen also have a new Nexode Pro 160 watt charger, which can charge 5 devices simultaneously, supports up to 140 watts max output on the C1 and 2 ports, and has a real-time info display. To grab these new Ugreen products and score up to 40% off with Ugreen Prime Day deals from June 23 to 26, check out the link below. I've been saying this for the last couple of best OLED videos, and I still think it's true today. 32-inch 4K OLED is one of the best monitor formats on the market overall. These panels are large, high resolution, fast, and produce excellent HDR for gaming. With 2 main panel types to choose from, QD-OLED and WOLED, there are lots of great monitor options, and it's rare to find one that's outright bad. Unchanged from my last video, in my opinion, the best overall 32-inch 4K OLED is the Asus ROG Strix XG32UC WMG. This is a 32-inch 4K WOLED with a 240Hz refresh rate, and the reason why I think it's the best is because of its excellent feature set. It provides a stunning glossy true black finish, which is superior to QD-OLED glossy and does a better job of preserving blacks in all usage environments. QD-OLED has a pesky problem of blacks appearing grey in brighter rooms, which is a complete non-issue on the WOLED-based UC WMG. There are 2 other advantages to WOLED over QD-OLED. One is better HDR performance thanks to more consistent brightness output, with no panel dimming in bright scenes and peak brightness that still reaches 1000 nits. 4K 240Hz WOLED also offers dual mode support, allowing the monitor to run in a 1080p 480Hz configuration. This mode is super clear for competitive gaming and adds to the versatility of the product for those that play multiple types of game. Asus throw in some great features like their Neo proximity sensor, OLED anti-flicker mode, ELMB, and unlocked color controls. Now, QD-OLED does have some advantages, including a wider color volume with higher color brightness and better uniformity, but I think the overall package that the latest glossy WOLED panels offer is the best on the market. The XG32UC WMG is slightly cheaper in mid-2026 than it was last year, typically retailing for $1,000 US. That's on the higher end of 32-inch 4K pricing, but it's not outrageous compared to QD-OLEDs that start around $800. You'll probably find better bang for buck with the QD-OLEDs, however, if you're after a premium 4K model, spending 25% more on this tandem WOLED is reasonable in my opinion. Now, when it comes to bang for buck QD-OLEDs, it's hard to go wrong as most offer great performance. In 2026, there are 2 main 32-inch 4K 240Hz panel variants, the older panel, which first launched in 2024, and a new updated version which launched at the start of this year. The newer panel, which I tested in the Asus PG32 UCDM Gen 3, has higher full screen brightness, 300 nits versus 250 nits, slightly improved black levels in bright rooms, and is about 8% brighter in HDR content. You can distinguish the new panel from the old panel by its display HDR True Black rating. 500 tier is the 2026 panel, 400 tier is the 2024 panel. The new panel is better, but not by much, so in my opinion, it's not worth a significant price premium. If you find a 2026 model at the same price as a 2024 model, by all means get it. But largely what we see at the moment is that monitors using the original panel are quite a bit cheaper. For example, the MSI 321 UPX is just $800 US, but the new 322 UR-X24 is debuting at $1,100 US. In this situation, I'd save the $300 and get the older 321 UPX model. The 321 UPX is the model I'd recommend in most situations, as it's routinely a great value buy whenever I check pricing, but there are of course others that I've tested and liked, including the MSI 321 URX, Dell AW3225QF if you want a curved version, or the Samsung G81SF if you want something with a matte finish. I'd look at the options available in your region and choose the most affordable model with the features you want. Most variants offer great performance, and you can see the reviews right here on Monitors Unboxed for more information. You may want to wait before purchasing a 32-inch 4K OLED though, because in the next few months we are expecting new tandem WOLED panels to hit the market. At Computex 2026 we saw two new WOLED panels from LG Display, one using the RGWB subpixel layout and one with RGB stripe, both in a 32-inch size. These panels will be launching in the next few months and should offer even better performance than the XG32 UCWMG. I still need to test performance and assess pricing, but I'd recommend waiting unless you see a particularly stunning deal on a 32-inch OLED. If you're after a smaller 27-inch panel, my recommendations are unchanged from the last update. As of right now, the only available panel uses QD-OLED technology, and it's a shrunk-down version of the first-gen 32-inch panels. This means you can expect similar performance to the larger versions, but in a more compact, higher-density format. For most people here, I would recommend the Dell Alienware AW2725Q, which continues to offer outstanding value. Throughout most of this year, the AW2725Q has been available for just $700 US, making it the cheapest 27-inch 4K OLED on the market. It's even dipped down to $650 at times. There is cyclical pricing here, so it occasionally shoots back up to its $900 MSRP, but if you wait a few weeks for the $700 part of the cycle, there's great value to be had. The AW2725Q offers similar performance to the other options I've tested. It's just as bright as other models, it looks excellent for HDR gaming, it uses a glossy panel with deep blacks, and the only real downside is it lacks some of the features found on premium models, like a USB-C display signal input. There's a few other models that are worth recommending though, depending on pricing in your region. The overall best is still the Asus ROG Swift PG27 UCDM, but when it's priced at $1,100 US, it's just not competitive with the Dell model. You aren't getting enough extras to justify the $400 higher price tag. The ROG Strix XG27 UCDMG though is a much more compelling option now that it's sitting at $800 US, just $100 more than the Alienware. The Asus model has some additional features that are worth considering, like the Neo proximity sensor, KVM switch and unlocked sRGB mode, so I see this as an upgrade pick over the Dell if you're comfortable spending about 15% more. Just be aware that overall panel performance is very similar between these options. Lastly, while 27-inch 4K QD-OLED screens offer great performance right now, and I do recommend them, a 27-inch 4K WOLED competitor is set to enter the market within the next 6 months. We've seen this panel recently at Computex, we're expecting it shortly, and we know it offers tandem WOLED technology at 240Hz with an RGB striped subpixel layout. It could be worth waiting to see how those monitors perform before deciding on a 27-inch 4K OLED for gaming. If you're after a 1440p OLED gaming monitor, there's good news. This is the most competitive segment on the market, with the most options and the best prices. Like with the 4K category, there are two main panel variants. We've got QD-OLED and WOLED, each offering different strengths and weaknesses. There's a video right here on Monitors Unboxed that explains the differences between these panel formats in detail, which is well worth watching if you can't decide what option is best for you. Right now, I believe that 4th Gen Tandem WOLED is the best overall 1440p OLED panel type. That's not to say it's flawless, there are certainly some problems with these panels, but on the balance of qualities, I prefer the package Tandem WOLED offers compared to QD-OLED. My primary recommendation in this category is the Gigabyte MO27Q28GR. This is a 27-inch 1440p 280Hz Tandem WOLED which uses the glossy panel variant. This glossy panel preserves black levels in brighter environments much better than similar QD-OLED monitors while retaining excellent clarity with no coding grain. Reflections are a bit more problematic than QD-OLEDs in some situations. However, Gigabyte also offer a matte version of this screen, the MO27Q28G, if you'd prefer maximum reflection reduction. The MO27Q28GR does provide great brightness across SDR and HDR modes, typically offering a brighter experience than QD-OLEDs. HDR brightness is also much more consistent between different types of scenes, as there's no QD-OLED-like panel dimming. This means you get a combination of higher peak brightness in favorable conditions and better punch with better accuracy in bright scenes. It's a significant factor in why I recommend Tandem W OLED and why I prefer its HDR experience. Gigabyte offer a good set of features, including a black frame insertion mode, anti-flicker mode, USB-C input, and KVM switch. Color accuracy is good, and we get the usual great motion clarity and input lag that we see across OLED models. The reason why I prefer the Gigabyte model in particular is that it's typically available at a good price. The base MSRP of $600 US is highly competitive with other Tandem W OLEDs, and I've recently started to see sales down to $480, putting it in true bang for buck territory. Another great option is the ASUS ROG Strix XG27AQ WMG, which is very similar to the MO27Q28GR as it uses the same glossy Tandem W OLED panel variant. It's probably the slightly better monitor overall, as it has a few more color customization options and a handy proximity sensor, but it's more expensive than the Gigabyte model at $650 US, and it rarely goes on sale. If the Asus and Gigabyte monitors are the same price in your region, I'd grab the Asus, but I expect the Gigabyte to be noticeably cheaper most of the time and therefore the superior choice. You can learn more about which Tandem W OLED monitor is best in my recent roundup, where I looked at all the options currently on the market. While I tend to think WOLED is better than QD-OLED overall in the 1440p category right now, WOLEDs do have one significant flaw: dark grey banding. All Tandem WOLED monitors suffer from this problem, whether you get the Asus or Gigabyte models, and it's a lottery as to how badly the screen will be affected. In a lot of cases, the unit you get will probably be fine. I don't really notice this problem while gaming on the units I've tested, but in some outliers the issue is really bad. It's an unfortunate hardware level problem that I hope will be solved in the future, and you should be aware of it before buying a Tandem W OLED screen. So what about 1440p QD OLEDs? Are they worth buying? Well, that depends, but I'd say yes for two types of buyer. If you don't want to deal with WOLED grey banding, QD OLED doesn't have this problem, and overall it has better screen uniformity, so that's one reason to grab a QD OLED. The other is pricing. QD OLEDs are typically more affordable. Whether a QD OLED is worth buying is going to come down to the positioning of these monitors compared to WOLED in your region. Here in Australia, for example, the MO27Q28GR is $830 right now, but you can pick up a Dell Alienware AW2725D, a 27-inch 1440p 280Hz QD OLED, for just $600. That's a sizable 28% saving, and given that the AW2725D is a great product, with this sort of pricing, I'd probably recommend the Alienware over the Gigabyte. But then in the US right now, the MO27Q28GR is actually slightly cheaper, so this isn't a universal recommendation. What you do need to be aware of is that there are several budget QD OLED panel formats right now, some with very similar specifications. At a 240Hz refresh rate, there are actually two different variants. One is Display HDR True Black 400 certified and offers 1000 nits of peak HDR brightness. The other has no Display HDR rating and only offers up to 400 nits of HDR brightness. The better panel, with True Black 400 certification, is also brighter in the SDR mode, reaching 250 nits instead of 200 nits. If you're after a high-performance 1440p OLED for HDR gaming and are tossing up between Tandem W OLED and QD OLED, you need to avoid the models without a Display HDR rating. The lower brightness QD OLED variant is not competitive with Tandem W OLED at all, so to avoid disappointment, check the spec sheet for Display HDR tier and brightness numbers. True Black 400 panels with 250 nits SDR brightness and up to 1000 nits peak brightness are suitable alternatives to Tandem W OLED and can be worth buying. The Alienware AW2725D is one of these. But there is a reason to buy one of those lower spec QD OLED monitors, and that's if you're on a serious budget, which brings me to my next category. If you're after a budget OLED gaming monitor, there is an undisputed champion, the Dell Alienware AW2726DM. Priced at just $350 US, this is the cheapest 1440p OLED, And provided you are aware of the drawbacks that allow this monitor to hit such a cheap price, it's well worth considering. So in the previous section discussing 240Hz 1440p QD OLEDs, I mentioned how there are two panel variants, one with Display HDR True Black 400 certification and one with no Display HDR certification. The AW2726DM uses the latter variant, meaning it has limited brightness compared to most other QD OLEDs. In our testing, it reached just 190 nits of full screen SDR brightness, and HDR brightness never exceeded 380 nits, far lower than the 1000 nits we see from all the other 1440p QD OLED panel variants. This means the AW2726DM is not a very good HDR gaming monitor. In fact, in my review, I said it falls short of offering a true HDR experience. So why would I recommend this monitor and feature it in this video? Well, the simple answer is that OLEDs are great for gaming even if they don't offer true HDR. Relative to an LCD in the same sort of price tier, the AW2726DM is faster, clearer, higher contrast, and more vivid. As a 1440p 240Hz QD OLED, motion clarity is excellent, beating all LCDs with a similar refresh rate. You don't have to worry about overdrive settings or overshoot artifacts. This QD OLED is clear, artifact-free, and consistent across refresh rates. If you enjoy fast-paced games or like to play at higher frame rates, an OLED is a much better choice than an LCD in this price range. Image quality overall is also just better. Even without high levels of brightness, the AW2726DM has deep, zero-level blacks and per-pixel control, leading to outstanding contrast. LCDs just can't compete with the blacks of an OLED. Viewing angles are better, uniformity is better, color gamut is better, and this monitor uses a glossy, grain-free coating. I haven't seen a $350 LCD that offers the same contrast and motion experience as this QD OLED, which is why this Alienware model is easy to recommend for more budget-constrained gamers. But the price is key. The AW2726DM is a great buy because it's $350 US. At a higher price, it runs into much stronger competition from Tandem W OLEDs and the better QD OLED panels, which offer higher HDR brightness and a true HDR experience. If the AW2726DM isn't significantly cheaper than those monitors in your region, it isn't worth buying. Right now in the US, this Alienware model is about 30% cheaper than True Black 400 QD OLEDs, which is the sort of price difference I'd be looking for. If money is no object and you want the absolute best of the best 1440p gaming monitor, right now this is the Asus ROG Swift PG27AQ-WP-W, an unchanged recommendation from my previous video. This uses the very same sort of 4th gen Tandem W OLED panel I was talking about earlier, but bumped up to a 540Hz refresh rate. This beast does it all, whether you're after the best single-player HDR experience or the fastest motion and lowest input lag for multiplayer gaming. All of the benefits I was talking about with the previous Gigabyte model also apply to the PG27AQ-WP, including its true black glossy coating and fantastic WOLED panel. But there's another trick up its sleeve, a 720Hz 720p dual mode, increasing clarity even further compared to the standard 540Hz 1440p mode. The resolution here is quite low, just 720p, which is problematic in some games that have small text or UI elements, so for the most part I'd recommend sticking with the 540Hz configuration, but it's an interesting bonus feature that in niche use cases might come in handy. The major downside to the PG27AQ-WP is that it's super expensive. It debuted at $1,100 US late last year and has remained at that price into 2026. That's at least $500 more or an 83% premium over a 280Hz W OLED for what is otherwise a very similar monitor outside of the refresh rate. If you won't play games above 280 FPS regularly, there's not much point spending that sort of cash on 540Hz. However, it could be justified if you are a highly competitive gamer that wants the best clarity and responsiveness. If the high refresh rate and motion clarity of this monitor is appealing, but you don't want to spend $1,100 US, once again, a good way to save money is opting for a QD OLED instead. Current generation 500Hz QD OLED monitors start around $650 US these days and can be found slightly below $600 US on sale, making them significantly better value than the PG27AQ-WP. There is little difference between 500 and 540Hz, so the motion clarity these screens offer is just as excellent at a whopping 40% lower price. The battle between WOLED and QD-OLED is also more competitive at these higher price points because the 500Hz QD-OLED panels are brighter than the 240 to 360Hz variants. 500Hz QD-OLED exceeds 300 nits in SDR content, and some HDR scenes are brighter as well, though panel dimming is not solved. The 540Hz WOLED panel is still better in my opinion, but in the flagship category the performance gap between WOLED and QD-OLED is smaller, and the price gap is wider, so there's a lot more reason to consider a 500Hz QD-OLED here. As for which option is best, I recently did a roundup on the channel looking at 5 different 500Hz QD-OLED options and found that they all offered similar performance. I typically lean towards the MSI models because they provide great value and strong feature sets. The 272QPX50 is around $650 these days, which is a great price, and the slightly higher end 271QR-X50 is only $50 more. I'd also look at the Samsung G60SF, which has a matte screen coating, so it may not be for everyone, but it has been down at $600 for the last month, which is a highly competitive price. 2026 is the year when OLED ultrawides finally matured. We now have a great range of options across multiple sizes without some of the flaws of early models. I just recently published a video that goes over the best ultrawides on the market, but here I'll summarize my thoughts within the OLED category. The overall best ultrawide right now is the LG 39GX950B. It's a 39-inch 5120 by 2160 tandem WOLED at a 165Hz refresh rate, and in my opinion, 39 inches is the best size for an ultrawide. Same height as a 32-inch 16:9 monitor, but with additional width. This LG monitor has an excellent 5K 2K resolution, deep blacks in all environments, and it produces consistent HDR brightness across most scenes, avoiding pitfalls like panel dimming. Of course, overall performance is great thanks to the use of the latest tandem WOLED technology, but there's lots of other things I like. The 1500R curve is really pleasant for gaming and application use, the sub-pixel layout is good for text rendering, and there's dual mode functionality that boosts the refresh rate to 330Hz at 2560 by 1080. The only main downsides to this monitor are its relatively low 165Hz refresh rate at its native resolution and its extremely high price tag of $1,800 US. While I think this monitor is the best 39-inch OLED ultrawide on the market right now, Dell just recently announced the Alienware AW3926QW, which caught my attention in this category. Scheduled for release in July, this monitor is also a 39-inch 5K 2K tandem WOLED, but it uses a slightly different panel. It's got an RGB striped sub-pixel layout and glossy finish. LG tell me it should be priced at just $1,100 US, which is significantly cheaper than the LG model. I'd wait to see how this upcoming model performs before making a purchase. In the 34-inch category, the best monitors right now use the latest 3440 by 1440 QD-OLED panel released at the start of 2026. This new panel features a high 360Hz refresh rate, an RGB striped sub-pixel layout that Samsung Display call V-Stripe, and improvements compared to older models in areas like brightness and panel coding. As for which monitor using this panel is best, I've tested 2 models and found them very difficult to separate. There's the MSI MPG 341 CQR X36 and the Asus ROG Swift PG34 WCDN. Both provide excellent calibration across the SDR and HDR modes, along with identical brightness and general panel performance, so in games and applications they look pretty much the same. There are some small feature differences which I go through in the review, but I don't think you can go wrong with either option. These monitors are quite pricey though, typically costing over $1,000 US. If you want something a bit more affordable at the same size, I would wait just a couple of months. Samsung Display are preparing a 280Hz version of the new V-Stripe QD-OLED panel, which is going to be used in lower cost ultrawides soon, such as the upcoming Dell Alienware AW3426DW. We've been told these monitors should be in the $800 US range and should offer very similar performance to the 360Hz model, so check back on the channel shortly to see how they go and whether they're worth buying. Then, if you're interested in a larger ultrawide, my recommendation here is unchanged. The best 45-inch OLED ultrawide is still the LG 45GX950A. It has a massive 45-inch 5120 by 2160 WOLED panel running at 165Hz, providing insane levels of immersion. I'm not as much of a fan of this monitor as the 39-inch version. It's using slightly older panel technology and it has a more aggressive 800R curve, but it's still a decent display for those building simulator rigs or other setups that require a huge monitor. So that's it for this OLED gaming monitor recommendation video. As always, if you do want to learn more about the monitors I've been talking about, I have individual reviews available right here on Monitors Unboxed. I'd also recommend checking the links in the description for updated pricing information, as this does change over time. So check down there if you're watching this video weeks or months after it went live. We also appreciate anyone that uses those links to buy one of the monitors we've recommended in this video if you found it helpful. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. If you do want to support Monitors Unboxed directly, the best way to do that is via Patreon. Links to that is in the description below. We test tons of monitors every single year, and all of the good ones do make it into these recommendation videos. It's tons of work to put these videos together with all the testing and things like that. So we really do appreciate our Patreon members that make it all possible. So thanks to those people. And yeah, I guess that'll do it for this one, and I'll see you in the next one.